Hello there, and welcome back. Today, we're going to be making a super cheap, fairly simple French onion soup, and I'm going to show you how to do it. And for your convenience, here's the ingredients. So French onion soup is a pretty cheap and easy recipe to make, but one thing it doesn't skimp out on is time and love. This is one of those dishes that you could probably get done in an hour or two, but the longer you let it go and the more love you put into it, the better off it's going to be. Since it's only made up of a few ingredients, technique and love goes a long way in the dish, and it's a good way to get comfortable in the kitchen if you're just getting started cooking. There's not a lot of hurry up and go and quick. It's very calm and methodical and pretty easy to do as long as you're paying attention and you're not on your phone or watching TV or whatever. It's just a good way to get really in touch with your food. I'm not going to try and say this is a super fast, easy dinner meal. It's not. This is the kind of dish you make on your day off when you just feel like cooking to relieve some of that stress from the work week. And it'll make so much soup that you can freeze some of it for what feels like an eternity and enjoy it later if you want to. And if you've never made a French onion soup before, I urge you to give it a try. But with all the chit chat out of the way, let's get into the prep. Now, as you may have guessed by the name, the French onion soup involves quite a few onions. I'm going to be using 6 of these large yellow onions. You can get sweet onions if you want to. Those are the 2 onions I would suggest that you get. Sweet onions are a little more traditional than yellow onions. Yellow onions are a little bit more for an American French onion soup, but I like the flavor a little better, so that's what I'm going to use. The prep work for this really isn't that hard. You just take a bunch of onions, cut off the top and bottom, cut them in half, peel that outermost layer of skin off, and then normally what you'd see in a French onion soup is just cutting down the onion. But the problem I find with that is the onion pieces end up just a little too big, and then even after they've cooked down and reduced, they still don't sit on a spoon very well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this onion against the grain so that it makes 3 nice little strips, and then go ahead and cut that up. That way when it's cooked and reduced, the pieces are a little bit better to get on a spoon and eat. You get more in each mouthful. And if you haven't already, if you've got an extra pair of swim goggles or something of the sort, it might be a good time to put them on, because you're going to end up crying during this part. I don't know why onions are so angry, but they sure are. I'm sure they developed this natural tear gas as a self-defense mechanism, and it's a wonder to me anybody ever decided to eat an onion. There are a lot of foods like that, where I wonder who was the first person to look at it and decide they were going to try and eat it. Artichokes are a pretty good example of that. I feel bad for the first person to look at an artichoke and be so hungry that they were like, you know what? I'm going to try that. I suppose that's just a good example of just because something's weird looking doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It's just a little different. I kind of feel that way about mushrooms too. Thinking about how many different mushrooms our ancestors had to eat to figure out which ones were poisonous or not. Just talking to each other like, oh, well, it only made Jim poop for 3 days straight, so it can't be that bad. And there you are. Your prep's pretty much done now. That's literally it. This might end up being the shortest prep time for any dish I cook on this channel. The only other thing I'm going to need is my thyme, which I'm going to use to make I know you know this, an herb bundle. You thought I was going to say bouquet garni, didn't you? But we're going to take our thyme and just wrap all this butcher's twine around it. Easy peasy like. Only this time I'm going to try and get twine more down this whole guy here. Give that a little tie. And that's pretty much all you need. Thyme's pretty much the only herb that we're going to be using in this besides salt and pepper, just so we make sure that the onion is really the star of the show. But after spending all that time prepping everything, go ahead and buckle up for the cook, because it's going to be a long ride. But I'll see you at the stove. So for this next part, we're going to be using a large pot, and we're going to put that on a medium heat. And the goal really is to reduce the onions and caramelize them, but without browning them. By which I mean, we don't want to sear them or get char on them, we just want them to slowly caramelize and let all those sugars brown up and get delicious. And the goal, depending on how much time you have, is to get them right at the precipice of burning, but without going over that line. So go ahead and add your onions. grab our old friend Spatchy Boy, and then we're just going to slowly keep turning this and mixing it and slow cooking it until they start to caramelize and glaze. Buckle up for the ride because this is going to take a little bit, so get comfortable. Add a little bit of salt to this whole thing. Mix that first layer of salt in, and I'll give it a little bit more. And the salt at this point not only is adding flavor, but it's helping pull moisture out of the onions, which is going to help this cooking process happen even faster. So I'm not going to bore you with this whole 45 minutes or an hour of doing this, so you can see the progress that it's making, so you have an idea of what it should look like at the end and what stages it might be in. So lucky for you and the magic of video editing, you'll get to just jump to the end and see what they're supposed to look like, so I'll meet you there. One thing, however, don't do what I just did and forget the butter and the olive oil. About 2 tablespoons of butter and about a tablespoon of olive oil should do it. So we're starting to get a little fond on the bottom of our pan. So we're getting pretty close to them being done because it's at fairly low temperature. If I go any lower, they're probably not going to cook much more. So I'm just going to let these go for a couple minutes longer and then we'll be on to the next step.
Hello, it's me from the future. I had a little bit of an oopsie with a video file and am missing some. For this next part, all you need to do is take your sauteed onions and add them to some kind of dish and set them aside, and then prepare your pot for what you're about to see. So you want to go ahead and add your butter to your pot and then let that melt a little bit. Scrape some of that fond off the bottom because that's where the flavor lives. And then once your butter's pretty well melted, go ahead and just add a indiscriminate amount of flour until you can mix it together and you can get a kind of loose roux. You want it to be a little watery. And the roux in this is just going to help thicken up the soup so that it has a better texture over your tongue as you're eating it than just a watery soup. Go ahead and add your onions to that and then mix that into the roux until it's combined equally. Then go ahead and add your beef broth, just the whole container. Go ahead and add your veg stock, add you some salt, put in a little pepper, add your thyme bundle, bring it up to a boil, and then bring it back down to a simmer and let it sit there for about an hour and a half, give or take, and you're good to go.
Alright, so it's been a couple hours and our soup is reduced, so now all I need to do is get everything assembled, get it in the broiler, get it finished, and we can eat. And there's 2 ways we can do this. I've got an oven-safe dish that I can put my soup in, then my cracker, then my cheese, broil in the oven, we're good to go. But I know a lot of you probably don't have an oven-safe bowl, and if that's the case, when you toast your croutons, go ahead and put them close together, put some cheese over the top of them, and then broil that. So the croutons have the cheese on them on their own, and you can just set them in a bowl of soup. It's a nice alternative, so you don't need to go buy a bunch of fancy cooking stuff to get the same result. But I'm just gonna take some of my soup and add it to the bowl, add my croutons to the dish, 3 or 4 in there if I can, and add a liberal amount of cheese to the top of your dish. The cheese I'm using is raclette, which is in the Swiss family. It's a little earthy, it's a little pungent, it's kind of aggressive, so if you don't like an aggressive cheese, maybe don't use this one. Or if you can't find it because it's a little hard to come by, you can go ahead and use Swiss cheese as a replacement, and that'll work just fine. I'll go ahead and put it on a sheet tray, pop it in the oven on broil until the cheese is melted and a little brown and crispy over the top. Just make sure while it's in the oven finishing off, you keep a close eye on it so you don't burn the cheese or it doesn't go crazy. And there you are, it's all done. I've been at this for about, 5.5 hours, give or take. It definitely isn't a quick dinner idea, but if you got a day off and you want to do something fun, and you got a lot of time and love on your hands, it's definitely worth making. But as I like to say, if it's bad for the heart, it's good for the soul. I'll see you in the next one. Hello again. I'm going to shamelessly plug the Patreon once again. It's only $1 a month if you can spare it, and believe it or not, it actually helps the channel quite a bit. The French onion soup was actually voted on out of a poll on the Patreon, so if you'd like to be more involved in the channel, or you just want to show some support, I would really appreciate it. But if not, I completely understand. Again, if you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by, and if you're a returning viewer, I appreciate you being here. I hope you all are enjoying some of the fall flavors, and I do have a bit of a list going for what I want to do during this holiday season, so hopefully I can get to most of, if not all of them. But as always, if there's anything you want to see in particular, leave a comment down below and let me know, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. I'll see you later.